demonstrating appropriate behavior is only one part of the equation. You also need to be able to collaborate on a creative level. And that's something that James Lockrey from Chaos Theory is going to explore in his talk. James, I saw that you joined the tech check earlier. And I'm also mindful that we're sort of 1 minute away from officially kicking off. But are you here? Ah, there you go. There is the Discord native. Excellent. All right.
Well, that button before in my life.
Most excellent. All right. There we go. Welcome to the stage, James from Chaos Theory on creative collaboration. The virtual floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, Jens. All right. I will see if I can share my screen, and hopefully everyone else can see that too. Is that coming through for everyone?
Yep, that's working.
Awesome. Right. Well, thanks everyone for your time, and thanks IGEA and the IGEA Educate Summit for having me. So I'm going to talk for the next 20 minutes or so about the art of creative collaboration, as Jens mentioned. Some tools we use at Chaos Theory to help with, productively disagreeing about the games that we're working on, and maybe some things that you can apply to your own teams and games as well. I'm the managing director at Chaos Theory, so we're a sort of smallish 15-person team based mostly in Sydney, but also all up and down the East Coast. And a lot of what I've got to share with you today is stuff that we do in our own team. So first up, one of the challenges with creative collaboration is not necessarily just people skills. A lot of creative work is highly ambiguous, and most work in games is creative work. There's often no correct answer that you can Google if you and a team member are disagreeing about something. So when you are disagreeing, there's not necessarily anything external to point to as a ground truth. And sometimes teams can default to arguing or disagreeing about or defending solutions instead of interrogating the problems that they're trying to solve with their games. Like, I think the inventory should be a grid. I think the inventory should be a list. Now you're arguing about UI when you maybe haven't necessarily agreed on what the inventory needs to do yet. This behavior can kind of kill games or teams, because team members who can't separate their ego from their ideas become hard to work with. A lot of the best collaborators that I've seen describe their teams as high trust, high friction, people who can argue with each other because they know that the argument isn't personal, and that put up that friction, that call out where things might not work or where things might need to be rethought to hopefully sharpen the work and make it stronger. So what I'm going to share with you over the next 20 minutes is a mindset to try and employ as much as you can. 3 different tools that we use at Chaos Theory to help keep our team focused on the right things, and a little ritual that ties them together. So we'll start with the mindset up first, because the tools don't make a whole lot of sense without it. You can take one thing away from this talk today. Take away this: fall in love with the problem, not the solution. What this means to me and what this means in games: solutions are cheap. You can generate 20 ideas in an afternoon, maybe 50 bad ones and 2 maybe good ones with AI's help nowadays. The expensive thing and the harder thing is more about defining the problem well, and everyone on your team having a good understanding of the problem. And in this case, the problem is what your audience expects, what makes your game special and unique, what do all of your team members need to have a very acute understanding of in order to deliver something great in the space that you're operating in. A lot of creative friction in a team isn't necessarily about who's right. It's about people defending different solutions to a problem that isn't properly understood. One team member thinks you're making a tower defense game. One team member thinks it's really more of an idle or incremental game. One team member thinks this feature is actually the most important thing because it's the one that they're working on. But the other team member, product manager, thinks that this is actually the biggest unique selling point and what we're going to focus on in our next trailer. I think looking at this mindset broader than just one game, hopefully many of you will work on many games, not just one. Many of your ideas or assets or features will not make it into those games. Many of your favorite ideas will be cut. I know for me, it's probably more than half at this point of ideas end up on the cutting room floor. And I think if your sense of self and self-worth is tied to whether your solution or idea wins, you'll burn out fast or faster than you should. I think instead of asking, did my idea win? Did my solution win? Ask, did we solve the problem and did we solve it well as a team? You can lose every pitch for a new idea or way of solving a problem and still be, I think, the most valuable collaborator on the team. The people who get hired back or become leads, they're usually not always the one with the best ideas. They're the ones who help the team find the best idea, wherever it comes from or whoever it comes from, whether it's the junior in the room that often isn't speaking up, or one of the creative leads that's weighing in on a technical decision. Some of these ideas can come from everywhere in a cross-disciplinary team. And this mindset can be a little bit harder than it sounds, especially for talented people to adopt. And most game developers, and most of all of you, are those talented people. A lot of talent attaches to its outputs. If you're good at something, your ego maybe latches onto the things you make, the assets that you've drawn or crafted, the code that you've written. Noticing that and sort of unhooking from it is a lot of the work with adopting this mindset. Another point about tension in teams. So you've probably been told that diverse perspectives make ideas stronger. Which is mostly true, but I think also missing an asterisk. Different perspectives from your team genuinely do make games better. But when the team is aligned on what problem they're solving and what game they're making. When that team is not aligned, all of those different perspectives can end up producing slower decisions or arguments amongst the team and worse outcomes for the game itself. You may have experienced some of both versions of this already. Maybe the good team or the good group project is everyone pulling in the same direction. You can have productive disagreements that actually sharpen the work, make the game better. Or maybe the bad team or the bad group project is everyone has opinions, nothing ships. You end up doing it all yourself the night before. I think making sure that everyone is aligned on what's important and moving in the same direction does take a lot of conscious effort. Collaboration isn't automatically good. It's good when there's a shared frame to evaluate those ideas against. Otherwise, it can become a committee, and game design by committee rarely makes great games. A lot of collaboration advice can really be about conflict avoidance dressed up as professionalism, like trying not to get into conflict with team members. And I don't think you should be looking for this necessarily, but games are systems, and those systems can expose contradictions quite ruthlessly. If your narrative designer on your team wants player choice to matter and the level designer wants really tight pacing, that is a real tension, not a communication problem that can be smoothed over or avoided. You need to discuss and determine which is more important and work with inputs from perhaps both sides to either try and balance or just agree that maybe the pacing is actually more important than player choice mattering in this level or this moment. A lot of teams that ship good work tend to escalate those disagreements faster rather than suppress them or avoid having them. Naming that trade-off explicitly, we can't have both X and Y, which are we choosing? We have to choose one. Making that a decision that someone owns as well. I think consensus by exhaustion is how you can get mediocre games where maybe everyone on the team got 60% of what they wanted, but no one is proud of any of it. So the tools that I'm about to share are really about how to, some ways to help give you that shared frame, and to make that problem more visible so that the team can argue about the right thing. The three that I'm going to run through, vision board, helping to define what the game is, what problem we're solving, what success looks like. A confidence tracker or feature confidence tracker, helping to make uncertainty visible for your team. And then reference games, just giving everyone on the team a shared shorthand and way to speak about what we're building. All of them exist for the same reason, to keep your team focused on the problem rather than whose idea wins. So first up, we have a vision board. This is a important tool that we use at Theory. It's for us typically a Miro board, but the tool doesn't matter so much. Could be Notion, Confluence, FigJam, anything like that. And really, it's sort of a one-stop shop, one place that you can go to find what the game is trying to be, who it's for, what makes it unique or special, what the art direction is perhaps looking like, what questions we're trying to answer right now, and that sort of evolves throughout the life of the project. And also what we're afraid of, what are our big concerns, what questions do we not have answered yet. Hopefully my screen share is set up where I can just jump across to this and show you a little bit about what this looks like. So this is an example for one of our games, Rusthaven. We can see that we've got our elevator pitch and a vision statement. We have a list of goals that we're currently working towards, and we have a list of USPs that we need to keep up front. Info about like what's on the Steam page and competitor analysis, what our game does differently to competitors, info about personas as well. But basically a sort of one-stop shop where your whole team can go to view what is this game, and it sort of evolves throughout the life of the game itself. Jumping back in here. I think this is helpful because without having a shared vision, when someone says, I think the inventory should be a grid, the response can be opinion versus opinion. There's nothing to point to. With a shared vision, the conversation becomes, our vision says that we want a low friction onboarding or an approachable game for cozy game players. Does a grid serve that better than a list? That becomes a very different conversation. I think the vision is helping everyone argue in the same direction or roughly the same direction. I think it's also important that this is a living document. Vision board that you wrote once 6 months ago and then never updated is worse than no vision board, because now the board says one thing and the game has drifted somewhere else, and your team has maybe false confidence or doesn't really know what's correct, doesn't really know what direction we're heading. A common failure mode of trying to establish this shared vision with the team: you might write a beautiful game design doc in week 2 of the project, add to it and argue about it with your team for weeks until it's perfect. It describes everything about the game perfectly. You look at it once, all 40 pages of it as you start implementing a game, and then you never open it again. By week 8, it's pure fiction. You've iterated on your core mechanics 5 times since then, and what's described in the doc is no longer what the game is. And are we listening to the game or are we listening to the doc? How do we know whether this is right? I think updating your vision board or that doc as you update your game and making it low friction and easy to do so, not making it 80 pages that you got to go in and rewrite, can be helpful for that. We update ours about every month or when important things change. Maybe when we learn a hypothesis is wrong, or when an art lead has a new idea, when we cut a feature, this board changes to reflect that. A vision is only useful in guiding the next step. You can have a great game and maybe an unclear vision. It's better to have the great game rather than the other way around. But the goal of it is to help force you to be specific about what you're creating early, and then create artifacts that can't lie, whether it's a vertical slice of your game or a 90-second gameplay video. If your team can't agree on what a single level should feel like minute to minute, then you don't have a shared vision. You might have a shared mood board. Next tool that I want to run through is the confidence tracker or feature confidence tracker. This one I don't have a live demo of, but hopefully the screenshot is clear enough. It's really simple. It's basically a spreadsheet, which is my favorite kind of tool. You list every feature in the game. You rate your confidence in it, high, medium, or low, either collectively as a team, and you pick the lowest value, or each person gives their own confidence rating, and you can average them out. And you update this every sprint or maybe every month. In this, we can see in the left column, we've just got a list of the features. Next to that, we have a list of our different confidence levels, anything low showing up in red so that they're nice and clear. And we have a list of what are our reasons for giving it that confidence score. Why are we low confident or why are we high confidence in this? And then a series of next steps for those as well. What would help us raise this confidence? I think this is useful because it changes meetings. Without it, you can often ask, should we do this feature or not? Now you have a 30-minute argument or discussion with your team where people are advocating for different solutions. Instead, with something like this, conversation becomes more like, we're low confidence for our inventory system because we've just done a play test and there's a lot of player feedback saying that they were confused about it. What would make us move this to a medium? What do we want to address from that feedback, or do we want to cut this feature? Do we, are we not confident that we can get this to a good spot? And now you probably still have a 30-minute argument or discussion with your team, but ones that generate tasks that are hoping to move you in that right direction. Maybe do a quick prototype, maybe designer takes a stab at a new mock-up or something like that, but you're able to really articulate the team the areas that you are confident in, which is also a very good signal to your maybe art and dev team members. We've had instances in the past where they've taken a spec and spent a week building out a whole range of great code and scriptable objects and stuff like that, only for this to be a feature that we haven't play tested yet. And we play test and it's like, oh, okay, actually we need to make big changes to this. And it's like, oh, all of that work that we've done to set that up, we now need to make some heavy changes to. So being clear to the team what we're collectively high confidence in or low confidence in, and where we need to do more iteration or more playtesting or something like that to move to high confidence, helps the rest of the team also make good decisions around, maybe not overdoing it yet, or we'll wait to create assets for that feature until we're high confidence or something like that. I think this works because it makes I don't know a more legitimate answer. A lot of teams, especially smaller ones and maybe especially students, feel a social pressure to sound confident in their decisions. Everyone nods at the pitch, even though half of them are quietly unsure either how it works or if it's going to work. And 6 weeks later, when the feature is half built and not working very well, and everyone goes, "Oh yeah, I had concerns about that at the start when it was pitched. It's too late. You've wasted 6 weeks building something in the wrong direction." I think using a tool like this helps to force some honesty. And if you're not sure, you write low. I'm low confidence, and that's not a failure on you. Pretending to have high confidence when you don't is the failure. And I think this separates, I'm uncertain about this feature from I am uncertain. Feature has a confidence level, and you don't. You don't have to defend it. You just have to help the team raise that score or decide to kill it. And the final tool I want to run through here is reference games. And this one may be the most enjoyable of the three. Play games. That's it. You love that your job is just sitting around and playing games all day. I think what is important about reference games is picking very clear reference games for very clear reasons and making sure that those reasons are clear to everyone on the team. Everyone on the team has to play these reference games. Yes, even the people who say, I don't really play that genre, especially those team members. And you don't have to all think, 30 hours, finish the entire game and 100% the achievements for it. I think, 2, 3, 4 hours is enough for you to get a pretty good feel for most games. Maybe not, I'll just get 3 or something like that. But I think having that shared vocabulary across your team, because everyone has played the same stuff, when you say, I want the combat, the dash to feel like Hades, everyone has played that and sort of understands what we're going for. It can help to provide some shortcuts for documentation or some shortcuts for having to do mock-ups and stuff like that, so that we're headed in the right direction faster. I think what this gets you when done well is positioning statements. You should be able to say, combat is 70% game A, 30% game B, and defend those percentages. And that precision forces you to do some real thinking about what you're making. Like, which 70% of game A are we taking and which 30% of game B, and why do we think that it's like that? Saying it's a cozy game is not really a position. Cozy is more of a genre rather than a position. Saying it's Stardew Valley meets Cult of the Lamb, but the management is on a boat instead of a farm, that's clearer positioning. I can picture it. Hopefully, the team can picture it more easily, and it's more useful. When done well, I think you get this beautiful thing where someone can say, "Yeah, I want the main menu to feel like the one in Hades," and the whole team knows exactly what that means. You don't need to write up a design doc, do some mock-ups. You have this shared vocab that makes it easier to talk about design problems and solutions. I think some things to watch out for with reference games, and the team says it's like nothing else. It's completely revolutionary and brand new. There's nothing like this game that exists. When I hear this in a pitch, I'm usually disappointed or my heart sinking because it almost always means that the team hasn't done the homework. Almost every game has reference points, and if you can't name any, you probably don't understand your audience well enough yet. And also not just picking reference games that are the biggest and most popular games in that genre, even if they're only loosely connected. I think really drilling down into, on Steam, more like this and figuring out what's on that list. And also vague references. Telling me it's like Zelda doesn't really tell me anything. There's been 20, 30 Zelda games. Which one and which mechanic? I think being specific about what you're referencing from those games and why is important. This is another live demo. So this is an example of what we look at when we're looking at some of our reference games. We've got 3 that we've picked for this particular game, and we have this whole mirror board with a bajillion GIFs in it that says, like, here's what quests look like in all of those 3 reference games. And when we say we want quests to look like Spiritfarer, we're like, okay, we've got a reference point for that we can look up and say, yeah, we want this column structure, or maybe we want it to be, mostly like Spiritfarer, but actually a little bit like Dollock Town, and here's what it looks like in that game as well. So having that shared reference library that everyone sort of knows what we're talking about can make it really, really speed up some of those design discussions. All right. Last piece is the ritual. 2 questions that you can run with your team, maybe every couple of weeks or every month. What do we know, and what do we need to learn? That is basically it. That's the ritual. I think why this is useful is that most teams default to asking, what should we do? I want to build, I've got to make something of wanting to do the next set of features. I think this is automatically jumping into solution mode a lot of the time. People come in with answers to solutions. I think these questions force you back into problem solving mode. Before we decide what to do, what do we actually know about the situation? What's changed in our game recently? Where have we improved confidence? Where have we lost confidence? And what are the most important things that we don't know? What are the questions that we need answers to and need answers to soon? I think this is the more sort of operational or tactical version of the fall in love with the problem mindset. It bakes that mindset into a more regular habit that you can do every few weeks. An example for a game that we're working on, Rusthaven, we might have just finished a sprint and done a playtest with players. What do we know? Players are loving the salvage and repair mini games. The playtests mention it a lot, and it's the thing that they talk about unprompted afterwards. What do we need to learn? Maybe a few things. Does the world feel alive enough between those salvage runs? Are the salvage and repair mini games the part players love, or are they just the least worst part? And that's why players are calling that out as the part that they love. I think this prompt or question helps you to then figure out, okay, what do we need to do, going back into that solution mode, that's going to help us move in that right direction, rather than just, oh, my task is to add more salvage and repair mini games or something like that. How do I help to answer that question of what do we need to learn? I think this helps to build in a sort of mentality of better rituals beat better mission statements. I think a team with a beautiful vision doc and know practice or discipline will lose to a team with all of these shared rituals every time. So quick recap, mindset, fall in love with the problem, not the solution. Few pretty low effort, low tech tools, vision board, basically mirror board or any type of virtual whiteboard that you might have access to, confidence tracker, a spreadsheet, reference games, go and play some games and write some notes about them. All things that you can do pretty easily with your game or your team right now. That is it for my talk. So I think I've got about 5 minutes left.
Thank you very much, James. Yes, you do. That's about 5 minutes for Q&A. And I did actually see a couple of questions pop up as you were talking. There was one from Luke who asked, would you recommend that students use a vision board approach more so than writing a game design document, especially if it's in prototype stage?
Yeah. I would probably recommend that. We used to write the big, 80-page GDDs, and we've moved away from that because we found that it wasn't helpful. I don't know, different team members like to communicate in different ways, and a lot of our team members don't like to communicate in lots of text. And I don't think that lots of text or even supported by mockups is sometimes the best way to describe certain features. And because it was so, big and detailed and unwieldy, anytime we made a major, pivot to a feature that we hadn't even built yet, we just documented. It's like, oh my God, that's going to be like half a day's work just to go back to that doc and rewrite all of those sections to sort of make it line up with what we've just decided to do. So yeah, starting as low fidelity as you can afford and not, letting documentation get in the way of making the game, but using it to help guide the team towards a shared vision. Writing documentation is easier than making a game. So it's, that's usually why we start with that step first. But maybe you can play those reference games for a few hours and say, actually, we want our ability system to be like this. Here are the parts that we want to keep. Here are the parts that we want to change, and that's your design document. You can stick that in the vision board instead. So yeah, I think design docs are useful, and having to think through your game before just building it is useful. But yeah, 10,000 words of documentation that someone reads once is maybe not the best use of that design time sometimes.
Yeah, excellent. Taylor was asking earlier, with the feature confidence tracker, who's rating it? Is that the leader or each team member?
For
Who's in
us,
charge of
that
it?
is the design lead on the project is usually sort of helping to curate or organize that list, but is running through it with the team. So in our case, it's sort of like a collective team vote on confidence for that feature, or pick the lowest. If someone says high, someone says low, that's interesting. Let's have a discussion about that and why are they different. But it's the design lead on our team who is sort of owning that, updating that list, and sort of prompting those conversations to happen.
Excellent. Leah was asking, I'm sure a lot of people are working in informal groups, very flat structured teams. How do you approach reconciling two different visions for a game when neither has inherent precedence/authority?
Good question. I think, yeah, we haven't had to deal with this for a while because people have kind of set roles and responsibilities. We do shuffle those roles and responsibilities on different teams. For us, we have a structure where we'll always have 4 leads on a team: a technical, a design, a creative, and a production lead. And that, those aren't the same people every time. Maybe a junior artist is actually the creative lead on this particular game. But being clear up front um, who is accountable for what is important to be on the same page about, like who owns creative decisions. And if it's shared ownership, how do you resolve those disagreements is an important, is it, you have to unanimously agree, or each of you can veto one major feature or something like that. I think just having sort of clear rules of engagement, and having those discussions up front, how do we want to work together, what do we value as a team, can help to sort of set some of those expectations early before you get into the thick of the weeds. But yeah, we generally have a reasonably flat structure on our teams as well, and sort of want to seek that input. But at the end of the day, we've assigned you're the creative lead, and if the 4 artists on your team are disagreeing about, I want it to look like this, I want it to look like that, it's your call. And you can seek the input from those team members, but you do have to decide.
Thanks, James. We have time for one more question, and let's go with the one from Steve. James, do you have any more detailed documentation further to what you shared in the slides about setting up your vision board, confidence tracker, all those other Miro boards that you can share? I'm talking about templates or something to that effect.
I don't have it on hand, but I did have a resources slide at the end of the presentation, and I can drop this to you, Jens, and share it with people afterwards. And I can maybe add a link to some template or some empty versions of that, basically, for anyone that's using Miro or whatever, that they could use themselves. For the competence tracker, it's just a spreadsheet with like 5 columns, and for the vision board, a few different frames that can leave empty. But yeah, happy to include that in the resources slide at the end.
Amazing. Thank you so much, James. All right, look, I'm mindful of time. We will be right back with a panel discussion on career opportunities once you've graduated by either working in indie, a large studio, or maybe working as a contractor. James, again, thank you so much for joining us. Really, really appreciate it. I also have your presentation on file, so maybe we can share that after the talk as well. And it sounds like that would be very helpful. So thank you so much for joining. We'll be right back in about 4 minutes with our panel on different career choices, what it takes to pursue them. Thank you, and see you soon.